Hello, dear students. Thank you so much for joining me here on sj'sclasses. Today we will discuss chapter 6 of the novella Animal Farm, written by George Orwell. I have posted videos on the earlier chapters on my YouTube channel. Please do watch it. So, from the previous chapter, we understood that the farm has been captured by Napoleon, who is one among the pigs. He chased away Snowball, who was actually someone who worked for the betterment of the farm. He wanted to construct a windmill. He laid out plans for it, and it's when the animals they were almost in favor of the plan of the windmill that Napoleon chased away Snowball from the farm, and he brought the farm under his control. He abolished the Sunday meetings, and he also stated that from now on, the pigs would give the animals orders to be followed for the next season as well as the next week. So the entire control of the farm was now in the hands of Napoleon. Let's discuss some of the important events in chapter 6. All that year, the animals worked like slaves, but they were happy that they did not work for anyone else, especially human beings. They did the job for their own benefit. Throughout the spring and summer, they worked a 60-hour week, and in August, Napoleon announced that there would be work on Sunday afternoons as well. But this work was strictly voluntary. But the problem was that any animal who absented himself from it would have his rations reduced by half. Now, no animal would want that to happen. They were already being given less food, and Napoleon said that if you don't turn up for Sunday's work, then your rations would be reduced by half. So the animals, they quite naturally they reported for their duty. And that particular year, the harvest was a little less successful than in the previous year. And the two fields which should have been sown with roots in the early summer were not sown because the ploughing had not been completed early enough. So we understand that things are not going quite smoothly on the farm. Earlier, everything used to happen on time, and even the harvest was a big success. But as of now, harvest has reduced, and also things are not happening on time. As I said earlier, as I said in the previous chapter, Napoleon at first objected against the construction of the windmill, but later on, after chasing away Snowball from the farm, he, through Squealer, announced to the animals that the windmill would be constructed, and that the plan of constructing the windmill was actually put forth by Napoleon. So the animals they geared up to construct this particular infrastructure, but the problem was that the animals could not solve how to break up the boulders or rocks or stones into pieces of suitable size. The only tools that they had on the farm were picks and crowbars, which no animal could use. It was only weeks afterwards that they could find something, or they got an idea which could be used to break the boulders. They decided to utilize the force of gravity. The animals they lashed ropes around these huge boulders, and all of them together, cows, horses, sheep, and all the other animals, and even pigs. Now, pigs they never did any work; they only supervised works. They only gave orders to the other animals. But when it came to the breaking up of the stones into pieces, even some of the pig joined the activity, the exercise. So all of them together they dragged up the slope to the top of the quarry, and they toppled it over the edge and they shattered it to pieces. So that is how they solved this particular problem. And it's in chapter 6 we read much about the character called Boxer. He is a character whom all the animals admire. He is someone who has great strength. He even has two slogans. His slogans are "I will work harder" and "Napoleon is always right." And these slogans, it was like sufficient answer to all his problems. And when the boulder began to slip and the animals cried out in despair, Boxer always, came for their help. He was always there for helping anyone who was in trouble. He was such a strong animal. And he even made arrangements with the cockerel to call him three quarters of an hour earlier in the mornings instead of half an hour. And what he did during his spare moments was, he used to go to the quarry alone and he would collect a load of broken stone and drag it down to the site of the windmill unassisted. So he worked for the farm, he worked hard for the farm, and he never even spared a single moment. When he had a spare moment, he worked, towards the construction of the windmill. Now, one Sunday morning, when the animals assembled to receive their orders, earlier, I hope you remember, earlier the animals used to debate among themselves. They used to ratify the decisions made by the pigs, but as of now, they gathered on Sunday mornings to receive their orders. There were no discussions, there were no debates, there were no ratification through majority vote. They used to assemble only to get their orders. And Napoleon announced that he has decided upon a new policy. And the policy is that from now onwards, Animal Farm would engage in trade with the neighboring farms. But he said that this was not for any commercial purpose. It was simply to obtain certain necessary materials which was urgently necessary on the farm. But the animals, they were not happy with this particular decision or policy made by Napoleon, because they had and then they remembered that they had passed a resolution not to engage in trade with other farms. They remembered, and this was something which was taught by all major, that not to engage in any sort of business or trade with any human beings or any farm, any nearby farm. So they were quite uneasy with this particular decision. But Napoleon went ahead with his decision. Mr. Wimper, who was a solicitor or a lawyer living in Willenden, agreed to act as an intermediary between Animal Farm and the outside world. And it was decided that he would visit the farm every Monday to receive his instructions. And later on, Squealer was sent around, to pacify the animals. We saw this character earlier in the previous chapter as well. Now, he was sent around to justify the act of chasing away Snowball from the farm, and he called Napoleon's act as a sacrifice, as an act of sacrifice. So Squealer was sent around to pacify the animals, to set the animals' mind at rest, and he assured them that the resolution against engaging in trade and using money had never been passed or even suggested. This is how he plays with the animals' memory. He says that nothing of that sort was decided. It was not even suggested, and it was pure imagination. Something which was probably something which was a lie which was probably circulated by Snowball in the beginning. Snowball, as of now, is a criminal. That is how Squealer described him in the previous chapter. So he says he makes use of that particular comment that was made earlier. He blames Snowball for this particular act as well. And every Monday, as decided, Mr. Wimper visited the farm, and it was at about this time that the pigs suddenly moved into the farmhouse and took up their residence there. Again, the animals seemed to remember that there was a resolution against this, to that we will not stay in the farmhouse, and that this particular farmhouse would be kept as a museum. This is what they had decided earlier, but as of now the pigs had taken up residence there. Squealer again was able to convince them that this was not the case. He said that it was absolutely necessary that the pigs, who were the brain workers or the brains of the farm, should have a quiet place to work in. And he also added that it was also more suited to the dignity of the leader. So there were two reasons behind the pigs moving into the farm. One is that they needed a quiet place to work in, and the other is that this farmhouse suited the dignity of their leader, who is Napoleon. And That is when Muriel and the other animals remembered that there was actually a commandment which was written against sleeping in beds. So Muriel reads one of the commandments which was written on one side of the barn. It was the fourth commandment that she read out, and now it read that no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets. The animals felt quite uncomfortable with this. They did not exactly remember the ending phrase, which was no sheets. So as readers, we understand that the commandment has been rewritten, or the commandment has been violated by the pigs. November came with raging south winds. The building of or the construction of the windmill had to be stopped because it was too difficult to mix the cement. And finally, there came a night when the gale or the storm was so violent that the farm buildings rocked on their foundations and several tiles were blown off the roof of the barn. And in the morning, the animals came out of their stalls, to measure the intensity of destruction that was brought about by the gale, and they found that the flagstaff had been blown down, and an elm tree at the foot of the orchard had been plucked up, and later, they saw a sight which was so terrible that some of the animals they gave out a huge cry of despair, and the sight was of the windmill in ruins. The windmill was destroyed by the strong wind, and Napoleon he paces to and fro in silence, occasionally snuffing at the ground, and finally he says that, "Comrades, do you know who is responsible for this? Do you know the enemy who has come in the night and overthrown our windmill? Snowball." He suddenly roared in a voice of thunder. So even the destruction of windmill, which was actually caused by the gale, the strong wind, was blamed on Snowball. So that is where chapter 6 ends. Thank you so much. I have posted all the other video lessons pertaining to chapters 7 to 10 on my channel. Please do watch it. Thank you so much.